Politics. Love it or hate it, you can't get away from it. You especially can't get away from politics when you're talking about rail transit projects of various kinds, as project after project gets delayed, scaled back, or canceled because of influential politicians being project roadblocks. This has happened so many times that the question of whether a rail transit proposal is feasible politically has made it into the comments section of my videos. This was especially the case with my original LA Metro C Line extension proposal. One common piece of constructive feedback with that video is that it didn't adequately account for the political realities of Orange County, the county that most of the original proposed extension was in. But should my rail line fantasies, whether it be in that video or in my other videos, account for political realities? Should rail line fantasies in general account for political realities? My answer, for now, is this. It depends on what you're trying to achieve with your rail line fantasy. And I think it's worth asking what you're trying to achieve with said fantasies, because figuring that out will then help you figure out whether to account for political realities, and if so, how much. If you're part of a transit agency that's trying to outline what a system would look like with a certain amount of additional funding, not unlike what Amtrak did with its Amtrak Connects Us proposal, you'd really have to account for political reality, not to mention how much available funding there'd be with whatever you propose. Doing that is important in these situations because accounting for politics is the only way you're going to have a map that, while aspirational, is achievable with both the political and the monetary capital available to your transit entity. If you don't do that, then you put yourself in a position to overpromise and underdeliver. If you want to have fun and go wild, then you will prefer to draw lines devoid of these realities. The maps I've seen on Reddit showing the New York City subway extending far out into the suburbs outside of the city itself would fall into this category. There's nothing wrong with such maps, and I used to make similarly wild maps. Because, yes, taking the E train from Penn Station to Suffolk County out Long Island just sounds like fun to me. However, if you're looking for rail plans anywhere close to what can never happen, don't look to these maps. But at the same time, I don't think people should look at those maps and then trash them for their lack of realism. Some people just like to have fun making wild transit maps, so don't poo poo their fun too much. If what you're trying to do is push governments a step or two beyond where they may currently be willing to go, your rail line fantasies may be more optimistic than the ones released by certain transit agencies, albeit won't be quite as optimistic as some of the wild maps you see on Reddit. This is the approach that I think is best used by transit advocacy organizations, because such organizations want to push politicians and other decision makers beyond where they're currently at. Yet, at the same time, you don't want such an organization to have ideas so wild that the politicians just throw them out for being too extreme, too radical. It's a fine line that some of these transit advocacy organizations try to walk. You can probably tell by this point of the video that I don't have a one size fits all answer to the question of whether rail line fantasies should account for political realities. I think it depends on who you are, who you work for, if anyone, and what you, or the place you're working for, are trying to accomplish. But where do I stand on all of this? How much does my channel look to account for political realities with these railline fantasy videos? Before answering that question, I ask people to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content on imagining better rail transit in the United States. As for the question of how much I look to account for political realities with my railline fantasy videos, the answer is that I am not going to let politicians constrain me from imagining lines that should exist, even if some of the route ideas may be a little wild. Here's why. I'm not imagining these lines on behalf of a transit agency, an advocacy organization, or any other entity. Because of that, I feel that I have the freedom to not put any constraints on myself or the routes I imagine. And I think I should take advantage of that freedom. Why? Because I think we need people who show what rail transit could and should look like if it were funded like it should. Because I'm passionate about rail transit, I am all too happy to be one of those people. Even if some of my ideas may be overly idealistic based on the current politics of certain cities, states, or even the entire United States. That said, whenever I find out that certain political forces may keep wild lines of mine from existing, I'll try to mention the forces that exist when I come across said forces. And I encourage my viewers to likewise point out said forces in the comment section of my videos, especially if I neglect to mention said force or forces. After all, I think it's important to know which rail lines could and should exist, while at the same time being aware of the obstacles that might keep certain lines from existing. That, in turn, might allow transit advocates to strategize how to overcome some of these obstacles so that at least a couple of my wild ideas can turn into reality by the time I die. And believe me, as I'm in my early 30s, I hope to be on this earth for a little while longer. Hopefully, long enough for at least a few of my fantasy lines to turn into reality. If any of my viewers also imagine rail lines that could and should exist, I'd be curious to hear in the comment section below how much you account for political realities and coming up with your fantasy ideas. Thank you, and have a good day.